It is Friday, and we are working for Crusoe, Friday, March 21st, 2025. In Los Angeles, he is Sam Park. In Los Angeles, I am John Ramey. And in truth, we are taping this on Thursday night. We are going to talk about the new prime minister in Canada. We are going to talk about Friedrich Merz, the new German chancellor, who's in a war of words with the former Russian president. The president of Turkey, President Erdogan, is cracking down on political opposition. And we have a Fed update. And Jerome Powell, our favorite deadhead and head of the U.S. Central Bank, has spoken. Let us begin with our brethren to the north. March 14th, 2025. Mark Carney was sworn in as the 24th Prime Minister of Canada. Dateline Toronto, Associated Press reporting. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney will trigger an early election this weekend for an expected vote on April 28th, a government official said Thursday, against the backdrop of a trade war and sovereignty threats from U.S. President Donald Trump. Carney will go to the Governor General, request to dissolve Parliament. There's a whole kind of ceremonial thing that is somehow linked to the King of England. We won't get into that.
He's the head of state.
Yeah, I understand that. Prime Minister Carney earlier joined the Edmonton Oilers hockey team of the National Hockey League on the ice Thursday for a morning skate. Carney was a former Harvard goalie.
Correct.
And he wore a number 24 jersey in reference to him being the 24th Canadian Prime Minister. So I like it. We got a sporting Prime Minister in charge of Canada.
Well, I mean, I think we've had plenty of athletic heads of state heads of government of many different countries. So it's really not.
Did Trudeau get out on the ice? I didn't see Trudeau.
Well, he might have. I mean, look, the point is, if you're a male child of, any over the age of 30, I would think everybody plays hockey. I mean, I think Carney pursued it more.
Played at Harvard. That's big time. Yeah.
Okay. But the fact is, he's actually done more important things in his life, John. Difficult as this might be for you to believe.
No. This is a confluence of both novel newsworthiness and my sporting interests. So
okay, but the point
it's red meat, Sam. It's irresistible.
The point I'm making is that his tenures as the governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England are more relevant, not just in general, but to our particular program here on Working for Crusoe.
I completely agree. I can see
Good.
the point.
I'm glad that I could get you to concede this important point. And as I mentioned, he wasn't just the governor of the Bank of Canada. That is the equivalent to our Federal Reserve. He was the head of the Canadian Central Bank. But he had that job during the 2008 financial crisis. That was an easier job for him than it was for then Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, mainly because Canadian banks, then as now, had very sensible banking regulations. And so, it was an emergency and he handled it very well, but he didn't have a whole huge nightmare of bank supervision to deal with in the same way that Bernanke did. Mind you, he was also the governor of the Bank of England, that is the head of the UK central bank, during Brexit. And now that was a trickier job. Okay, that was a big economic atom bomb almost for the United Kingdom, and he was esteemed to have handled that crisis extraordinarily well. So now, as Canada's facing an enormous trade war, the likes of which that it's never seen with the United States, Mark Carney, having won the leadership of the Liberal Party and thereby becoming prime minister, might easily be seen to be someone that you can count on in time of economic crisis. But on top of that, no sooner did he announce his candidacy for the Liberal Party leadership, but he started going right at Donald Trump. And this was the big switch because Donald Trump, as we know, didn't make any, real threats toward Canadian sovereignty before he was reelected last November. And suddenly it's something he's talking about all the time. And he began talking about after winning the election. And so at that point, the Conservative Party, that is the opposition party, was doing great. They thought that there was going to be an election sometime this year anyway, and they thought that they were just going to crush the liberals, and all the polls said that was what was going to happen. But
Not now.
no, not now. They've lost their lead. The conservatives have lost their lead. The liberals, I think, have a small lead now. But that was the conservatives lost a lead of about 20 points.
Yeah.
And
Anti-incumbency was in play.
there's that there was that, but the problem was that Poilievre, the Pierre Poilievre, that is the leader of the Conservative Party, was thought to be someone who would get along better with Donald Trump, especially because the previous Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had terrible relationship with Trump.
But now it's not politically appealing for any Canadian voter to have
That's right.
Prime Minister get along with Donald Trump, who's attempting to bully them.
That's exactly right. It's suddenly being, thought to be might have a good relationship with Trump is the last thing you want to be. Now, Trump sort of complicated this just the other night when he was sitting down with Laura Ingraham on Fox News, who spent 4 minutes out of a 20-some-odd minute interview talking to him about Canada and why
his unending threats to its sovereignty.
Exactly right. Just seemingly baffled by this was Laura Ingraham.
If Laura Ingram's telling you be serious, be serious.
Yeah, well, but look, no one can tell him that. And Trump went on and on. He said they're meant to be the 51st state, but he went on to say that he'd rather have a prime minister from the Liberal Party. That is, which seems a little odd, but maybe he's trying to sort of briar patch this, right? Saying, oh, well, and because if Canadians don't like him, maybe they'll do the opposite of what he says he wants, right? But so anyway, that's what he says. I don't want to speculate as to why he might have said such a thing. Poilievre, the following day came up and said, well, of course he does. He wants a liberal because he can...
To push around.
Yeah, to push around, because... And then Poilievre said, I'm a tough guy. And I was thinking...
Sure, Pierre.
Poilievre, Pierre, mon ami, that's not how you do that. I mean, I'm sorry, right? I'm a tough guy. I mean, so this is... We're going to have to see how this goes. Again, it's expected that Carney will call the election this weekend, but he hasn't actually done it yet. But if everything goes as expected, they will have the election at the end of next month. Meanwhile, the Liberals have already started running ads on Canadian television in which they've got these montage of clips in which it's very easy to find footage of Poilievre saying exactly the same sort of things that Trump says, talking about wokeness, all this sort of, culture war kind of stuff that, let's face it, because Donald Trump is the most successful right-wing politician on earth, other right-wing politicians in other parts of the world have, started aping his behavior in the hopes that his success might somehow rub off on them. And to some extent, I don't think that's an unreasonable hope, but it's not working in Canada and in some other places, as we'll soon see.
I just would like to point out that Prime Minister Carney was skating with the Edmonton Oilers, and that is a tie-in to the trade war, which of course is part of our free trade. Our trade relationship with Canada involves Canadian oil, Edmonton being an oil town.
Yes,
so
in Alberta.
So name the hockey team. Yeah, Alberta, oil fields of Alberta. The Midwest runs on Canadian oil, right? That's a big deal.
And that's where Carney's from. He's from Alberta.
Awesome.
And so
he's going to know how to play that chip probably better than Trump will.
I mean, it's difficult to understand how Trump thinks he's playing this, right? And so I think you're probably right. But if it's all just about trying to take over Canada, it doesn't really matter, right? All this stuff about tariffs and things like this.
I guess that's not a negotiation then, if you just want to annex something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a negotiation.
And he has said that he would use American economic power to try and make Canada the 51st state. And that's why everyone in Canada, that is, assumes that is in fact what he's trying to do.
Donnie, you're sudating yourself.
Well, we'll see.
Oh, you didn't know I had that one. Yeah.
No, it didn't occur to me.
Speaking of unchecked militarism, let's check in on the Germans and the Russians. DW, fine German news source, reporting former Russian President Medvedev compared Friedrich Merz, Germany's likely next chancellor, to Nazi propaganda chief Joseph Goebbels. Meanwhile, Moscow has declared another German political organization, quote, undesirable. Moscow throwing a lot of stones. Quote, you're not in power yet, but already lying like Goebbels. Dmitry Medvedev, the former Russian president and prime minister, wrote on Telegram Thursday, comparing Germany's likely next chancellor, Merz, to Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. Medvedev served a single term as Russian president, as Vladimir Putin's puppet, from 2008 to 2012. That the puppet bit was me, not DW, and is currently deputy head of Russia's Security Council. And he was referring to comments Merz made during a German parliamentary debate on defense spending. Merz said Russia's war was, quote, a war against our country, too, taking place every day with attacks on our data networks, the destruction of our utility lines, arson attacks, contract killings, espionage against military bases, and disinformation campaigns. That's
all
the end
true.
of Merz's quote. Yeah, that's all true. Medvedev interpreted these remarks in the context of World War II, saying, quote, Nazi Germany attacked us like this from 1941 to 1945. We know how it ended. Bad start, Fritz. Hope it ends the same way for you. End of quote.
When Medvedev says this, he's doing it for the domestic Russian audience, right? He's not trying to appeal to you. And I don't think he has any expectation that he will. He doesn't care if he's not appealing.
It's just reckless.
To you.
It's reckless language.
Okay, but we're talking about a country that's already invaded its neighbor. I think we're well past the point of recklessness. And let's face it, what this is really about is the really adroit political maneuvering that Merz has been able to pull off, right? He's not yet the chancellor, but he was able to get an enormous increase in borrowing by the federal German government through the existing parliament. That is the outgoing parliament that is soon going to all leave their seats. And he did this by promising the Green Party, who will no longer be in parliament, that 100 billion euro of the money that they're about to borrow, mainly to fund defense spending, will be spent meeting the German climate change targets that the previous government had tried to institute. So the Greens agreed, and good for them, I think, because they could have just said, well, what do we care? We're not going to be in the government. But they did the right thing. And they've, of course, been among the most pro-Ukrainian party in all of the Bundestag, and that is the German parliament. So again, this is really unusual. And it was a real turnabout for Merz himself, because in order to do this, they had to pass this legislation in order to lift the debt brake in the German constitution. And as part of the conservative wing of the Christian Democratic Union, the center-right party of Germany, Merz, all through the campaign, said nothing about lifting the debt brake. In fact, was vocally opposed to doing so, and switched on a dime. But this is an echo of the previous story. What changed was that J.D. Vance appeared in Munich 9 days before the election that brought Merz into power, and scolded the Germans for how they run their multi-party political system, seeming to say that they were somehow excluding smaller parties. But Vance didn't stop there. He went on to meet with Alice Weidel, the head of the Alternative for Deutschland, AfD party, the far-right party in Germany, outside of the Munich Security Conference in Munich, and thereby giving her some legitimacy. Prior thereto, Elon Musk had campaigned for Alice Weidel. He did a 2-hour interview with her on X that all Germans could tune into if they wanted. He appeared via video link at an enormous rally that she had for the election. Here's the punchline. Didn't help, right? Vance saying these things Musk, the world's richest man, who, by the way, at about the same time that he was appearing with Alice Weidel at her rally by video link, that was about the same time that he was giving the Nazi salute here at home, which he denied rather implausibly, I might say, was a Nazi salute. And so these attempts by powerful Americans in our politics to somehow influence the German election didn't work. This is sort of an echo of the Canada story, right? Where suddenly Donald Trump is the best person that anybody can be campaigning against. Now, I don't want to overstate this, right? There are plenty of people in countries all over the world who actually like Donald Trump just fine. The point I'm making is that no other country likes him as much as we do.
No. And it's like an instant galvanizing force for countries who don't want, frankly, malevolent American actors messing in their trade or their elections.
That's right. And that's the return to our previous story. That's why Mark Carney is calling the election now. He wants to strike while the iron is hot, while he's got the momentum, right? And that's why
Merz could get a deal done, even though it was a reversal for him with the outgoing parliament.
100%.
Because like everybody in Germany realizes, oh, the Americans aren't serious. They're buffoons and they're dicks to us. And we've got to take care of some stuff now on our own.
Yes, and there are lots of domestic German issues that are coming into play here at the same time. For instance, Germany is just now leaving recession, right? Their economy is recovering, partly because they've already increased defense spending, but they're about to increase it a lot more.
And their recession was over a span of more than a year,
Yes. If there's one thing that Germany has, it's industrial capacity, which hasn't been doing especially well recently, but is about to get a whole lot of orders. Some of it's Soviet era in the former East Germany. There's plenty of artillery shells that can be built inside of Germany, and more advanced weapons also. And this could enormous expansion of government borrowing, primarily for defense, but also other infrastructure projects, could not have come at a better time for Germany, just in terms of its domestic economy. And suddenly, a lot of these industrial firms that were wondering what they were going to be able to do because of low demand for their products, suddenly that's not a problem anymore. And so, not just in Germany, but all through Europe, every body of the EU, the European Commission, the Council of Europe, Ursula von der Leyen's given at least one speech every day this week. And that's a lot even for her. And good for her. We like that. So things are really moving. Meanwhile, Europe has been excluded from the so-called ceasefire talks that Trump has been having with Zelensky and Putin. And
what are we going to call these? The Riyadh Accords or something?
The thing is, supposedly there is this ceasefire that's been announced, and nothing's actually happening. It's not working out all that much better than the ceasefire in Gaza, which is in tatters. Didn't last very long at all. The one in Ukraine seems even worse. And so Europe is, obviously, Madame von der Leyen is giving all these speeches for a reason, right? The people in the EU are trying to say, look at us, we're doing things, we're on the move, right? Fred's borrowing a lot of money, right? We're going to build, we're going to arm Ukraine. You can keep us out of the negotiations as long as you want. If we're not in the negotiations, why should we honor any deal you make? We're still going to arm Ukraine, right? If you don't want us to do that, maybe you want to talk to us too.
So last week we found ourselves, or I don't want to speak for you, I found myself in the position of agreeing with the supreme leader of Iran, the Ayatollah, instead of the American president. And this week I'm happy that Germany is rearming.
Yes,
it's in an increasingly bellicose Europe, again, because of the dereliction of duty of the current administration.
Yes, but I have to say, I'm extraordinarily.
Didn't expect that. Yeah,
I'm impressed with Friedrich Merz, right? Because there was no indication that he was going to be as skilled a political operator as he's turned out to be.
he wasn't in politics. He was in finance.
Well,
He's a
but
rich guy.
he'd been a parliamentary leader in the CDU, but that's it, right?
Yeah, and a
He'd never
long
been.
time ago.
That's right, and he'd never been in actual German government. But
Right.
he's obviously an observer,
Yeah.
very keenly, and he knew what was going on. Also, like Mark Carney, he spent a number of years in the financial sector
Right.
when he wasn't working in government, so he understands how the economy works rather well. And so I think that was one of the reasons why he could smell the opportunity, which, let's face it, was rather ripe.
So you got Carney and you've got Merz, two actual financially capable deal makers. You've got Vladimir Putin, an actual authoritarian warmonger, and you've got Donald Trump, a pretend tough guy and not a smart guy, except for in his own estimation. And
Yes, and
Putin,
a self-proclaimed master negotiator.
yeah. Well, is that why Vladimir Putin made him wait for an hour on the
Yes,
phone?
I would imagine it is. And
I
then,
mean,
I mean, Putin, this wasn't really all that complicated. Putin said, well, okay, I
Putin and
have,
Trump had a phone call this week. We should just point this out.
that's
That's the
right.
story. Yeah.
Yes. And it went on for, I guess, 2 hours or something like that. Putin was an hour late. But a number of commentators pointed out, and I think this is important to keep in mind, is that Trump doesn't speak Russian. Putin does speak English. You'll never hear him do it, but he definitely understands the language.
Sure.
So he doesn't have to wait for the translator to tell him what Trump said, whereas Trump does have to wait for his translator to tell him what Putin said. Now, Putin will sit there and pretend that he's waiting for the translator while he's trying to formulate his answer. But still, I don't think that it was all that complicated even at that point, right? He knows he's got to give Trump something, right? He can't have Trump walk away from this call with nothing at all. So he gave him as little as possible. That
Yeah.
doesn't
Hockey
even,
games.
yeah, hockey games and, oh, we won't attack energy infrastructure. But it's not, as soon as the call was over, the shelling continued
Yeah.
on
They
Ukraine.
attacked energy infrastructure in
Yeah,
Ukraine.
and other things, hospitals and the like, right? And so Trump will say, that he's getting something done. He probably isn't, but even if there is a ceasefire, you could understand why anybody involved in this conflict on either side, frankly, could use a break, right? I mean, the good part is that even though Putin, after the call, his team put out a statement reiterating all the exact same demands that they want to see at the end of this: a totally demilitarized Ukraine that isn't arming itself, isn't recruiting soldiers or anything at all.
Isn't in NATO.
That isn't in NATO, right? No, no joining NATO, no joining the European Union. He's still asking for everything. And I mean, even if Trump agrees to that, I just don't think anybody else is going to.
The White House and the Kremlin put out kind of recaps of the calls, and the Kremlin one is much longer than the White House one.
Yes, a multiple.
The White House one, I don't think mentioned the hockey games, did it? I think only
I
the
don't.
Russian.
It's possible they did, but I mean,
Some
it was,
exhibition hockey
yeah,
games is what
that's
the Russians want to do to bring
and,
America and Russia closer together.
well, Trump is like a lot of different people. As soon as someone starts talking about sports, that's all he can care about, right? I mean, you know the type.
AP said the White House says a lengthy phone call between Trump and Putin achieved a quote movement to peace in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I just I think our colleague Tim Miller pointed this out on the Bulwark. Like, it's just sad that it's just embarrassing that Trump can get on the phone with Putin and get played like a fiddle, and then the White House is going to foist this notion that progress has been made
Yeah.
in this war to the American people. I mean, it's disgraceful.
No, it's absurd. But at the same time, the actual net of this event is that if this buys anybody any more time, that's good. Because as we discussed, I think a couple of weeks ago, right, the Europeans are going to need time to build up their defense capabilities. All right.
But it also gives Russia time to rearm after 3 years of their dudes in a meat grinder.
That's absolutely true. But the fact is that everybody on every side needs time. Okay. And so this is where there can be a confluence of interests among all the possible participants. Right. And so if the Europeans now have more time to rearm, that I think in general is at least not a net negative. Let's put it that way.
Shall we move to Turkey?
Please.
Okay. Well, if Vladimir Putin's dictatorship isn't your cup of tea, perhaps illiberal democracy and authoritarian strongman uh, uh, President Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey is more
Recep
your
Tayyip
style.
Erdogan, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think
B-
it's something, but it's worth looking at because I think Erdogan's regime is somewhere closer to where the United States is
Totally
actually
agree.
heading
Yeah,
than
I
and
totally agree.
almost any
Yeah,
other country on earth. It's a large country,
yeah,
military power, illiberal democracy, as you say.
yeah.
I think that's really where we're heading.
BBC reporting authorities in Turkey. So, anyway, take note, those of you who are fans of the First Amendment. BBC reporting authorities in Turkey have arrested dozens of people for, quote, provocative social media posts after the mayor of Istanbul was detained on Wednesday. The mayor was one of 106 people held on charges, including corruption and aiding terrorist groups, a move that has sparked protests in Istanbul and the capital, Ankara. A member of the secular Republican People's Party, the mayor of Istanbul, whose name is Imam Oglu, is a key
Imamoglu,
rival.
yes.
I'm sorry, how do we say it?
Imamoglu,
Imamoglu. They don't
yes.
do a lot of hard G's in Turkish, I guess. Imamoglu is a key rival to President Erdogan and was set to be named as a presidential candidate for the 2028 elections later this week. Oh, but he's been detained now.
What do you know?
Critics say his arrest is a coup, quote coup, and are planning further demonstrations despite Istanbul's pro-Erdogan governor banning protests for 4 days. So it might be a democracy, folks, but there's no Bill of Rights in Turkey. This is interesting though. As commuters boarded trains at metro stations in Istanbul, a recording of one of Imamoglu's public speeches blared out from the loudspeakers. Quote, "I promise you with my honor that I'm going to win this fight." End quote. University students marched on the streets chanting, "We are not scared. We won't be silenced. We will not obey," a common opposition slogan in Turkey. But the number of protesters still relatively small for a city of more than 16 million people. And the political pressure is not going to be enough to make Erdogan release Imamoglu. Sad. Like that's
It is, but it's something worth bearing in mind. For instance, Erdogan himself, when he was an opposition politician, actually went to prison for a period of time, right? He was in, the weaponization of the justice system, as we might say, is
to
not
coin a
something.
phrase.
Yeah, it's not something that Erdogan invented, right? It's actually pretty run of the mill. To some degree, if you're an opposition politician in Turkey,
You're
getting
going to
arrested.
jail.
Getting arrested is sort of like making the major leagues, right? If you've never been arrested by the regime, you're
It
nobody,
means,
right?
yeah, you're
Yeah,
not
okay.
enough of a threat.
Yeah, exactly. And again, the authorities said, "Oh, there will be no, that they issued a ban on protest," and plenty of people were like, "Yeah, no, you're not doing that." Right? Again, that's not unusual either. Protests are routinely banned in Turkey, and they happen anyway. And so, again, it's all very alarming, right? We certainly wish that none of these things have happened, but we shouldn't analyze this event in the same terms that we would if they happened here, right? I
Which
mean,
I think is becoming more and more likely. That's why
yes,
it's I'm glad you highlighted the story.
that's why I brought it up, right? Because again, it might reach the point where someone said you can't protest, and well, some of us anyway, we would hope would have the courage to say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway,
Yeah.
because it is the First Amendment, right? It is our. Again, it's not the Second or Third or Fifth Amendment.
It's the
Right?
very
It's the
first.
first one.
Anything else on Turkey, or shall we move on to the Fed?
Oh, yeah, but by all means.
Okay. ABC News reporting Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell on Wednesday said U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs are partly to blame for price increases, leveling the criticism minutes after the central bank announced its decision to hold interest rates steady. Steady is a favorite adjective when describing not moving the interest rates.
Yeah.
They could just say decided not to change them. Sorry. The rate decision came weeks after Trump touched off a global trade war that sent stocks reeling and triggered concern about a possible recession. Even as the Fed left its main policy lever unchanged, the central bank predicted weaker year-end economic growth and higher inflation that it had in a December forecast. By the end of 2025, inflation will stand at 2.8%. That is slightly higher than a prior prediction of 2.5%, according to the Fed. The Fed also expects 2 quarter-point rate cuts by the end of 2025, matching its previous prediction. So it still thinks it'll cut rates, but it just hasn't done it yet.
Well, yes, and
that's me, not ABC. Sorry, carry on.
It's worth pointing out that if they think they're going to cut rates, that generally, in normal times means that the Fed expects that the economy is going to slow down, right? That's the reason you do that. And so there's a lot of indications that are not especially great for the American economy. I think it's worth remembering, though, when we first started doing this podcast during the Biden administration, many people who know more about economics than we do were predicting a recession, and it never happened. Now, the economic conditions are very different now from what they were then. But, a lot of people seem to, be banking on a recession. And I'm certainly not ready to do that. The underlying conditions of the economy are still rather strong, in fact. But again, the trade war in which we're now embroiled, it's like something we've never seen, and it could get considerably worse as time goes on. And in fact, in response to Chairman Powell leaving, or that is the Federal Open Market Committee, leaving the basic policy rate unchanged, President Trump put up a post on his Truth Social network urging the Fed to lower interest rates because of the tariffs, which is exactly the opposite of what you should do. And in fact, this goes back to our previous segment, right? President Erdogan of Turkey is on record saying that he thinks inflation is caused by high interest rates.
That's wrong.
Yes, it is wrong.
That's just wrong.
Yeah, and so this is just another way in which our country seems to be moving closer to a resemblance to Turkey. Hooray.
Good food.
Yes.
Speaking, this is ABC still. Speaking in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, Fed Chair Jerome Powell said the economy faces uncertainty, pointing to the Trump administration's potentially, quote, significant policy changes, end of quote. That's putting it mildly, Jerry, regarding trade, immigration, fiscal policy, and regulation. Uncertainty. Markets don't like uncertainty, Sam.
No, they don't.
Breaking news.
Yes. At some point, though, and we'll find out at the beginning of April, which Trump is calling Liberation Day, right? This is when the reciprocal tariffs on every nation are supposed to kick in.
Liberation Day.
He's calling it Liberation Day. So we'll find out exactly how strenuous these tariffs are going to be. But if that actually happens, I think people are going to have to stop talking about uncertainty, right? Because if you're still uncertain at that point, that's not uncertainty. That's denial, right? That's trying to talk yourself out of what's actually happening.
Well, I guess April will be the time we need to start really comparing cognac prices to where they are now. I haven't bought in a while. I don't think they've moved, but
I don't go shopping for cognac all that often. It could very well be.
But again, research, Sam. We should probably be doing that research now.
That's right. Just for on behalf of our listeners, mind you.
It's a sacrifice that must be made.
It could very well end up being the cruelest month.
T.S. Eliot.
Correct.
There we go. The Wasteland. Man, I might have to read The Wasteland just to put me in a good mood after all this
it takes
news.
A couple minutes. Yeah.
The Wasteland. Yeah. Famously an uplifting poem.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we started with hockey and we've ended with Eliot. So I think that's we've probably covered everything we should today.
Yeah, we'll never top that.
Yeah, geez. Next week, anything on the horizon?
Oh, you never know what could possibly happen.
I guess we'll get the Canadian announcement of the election.
We'll get the official announcement. Yes, I mean, but there'll be any number of things I'm confident that we can talk about.
All right. He's Sam. I'm John. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, folks.